Unfortunately, the conference turned a deaf ear and voted not only to keep those words in our discipline, but to add the admonition that performing or hosting ceremonies that celebrate homosexual unions is a chargeable offense for which a United Methodist clergy person could be tried in a church court. Not only did we fail to move into becoming a more loving, accepting, grace-filled church, we went backwards. We were not able to go to the 2008 General Conference in Fort Worth. That's when these stoles were predominant. But our Reconciling Ministry folks were present in large numbers. They hoped that a new resolution might pass to lessen the harm we are doing, which simply stated, United Methodists deeply disagree with one another, yet all seek a faithful witness. That was defeated, and they came home extremely discouraged. In May of 2012, Tom and I attended what is probably our last general conference. We're getting old. And we're also getting very discouraged. Although I must say that what you're doing here gives me great hope. Well, where are we? 2012. We came home with great sadness again that any effort to bring God's voice to our church had failed. We stood in protest wearing our stoles, disrupting the conference, standing beside our beloved Alice Cromwell, who was 91 years old, and she died quite a few months after that. We miss her terribly. Some of you may remember Alice. She came to this church for UMW Sunday and gave a talk. Her husband was Bishop James Thomas's administrative assistant, and she is one of the great saints of our church. It was an honor for us to be there with her. We would not have gone except for Alice saying to us she wanted to go so badly, but she said, Nell, I'm 91. I just don't think I can make it. And I said, Alice, if Tom and I went and took you, would you go? And she just lit up and was thrilled. We drove our car to Tampa, Florida, so we would have a car to take Alice back to the hotel to rest when she got tired. Never once would she go back to the hotel. Never once. On the final day of that conference, at a gathering of Reconciling United Methodists, Bishop Melvin Talbert, who happens to be African American, made a speech with just cheers for what he had to say. Part of his speech, he said, I stand before you here this afternoon, and I declare that God has already settled this matter. All human beings are created in the image of God. There are no exceptions, no exclusions. We belong to the family of God. After the conference closed with many people terribly upset, he went before the RMN folks again and said, I declare to you that the derogatory language and restrictive laws in the Book of Discipline are immoral and unjust and no longer deserve our loyalty and obedience. I call on the more than 1,100 clergy who have signed the pledge to stand firm on their resolve to perform marriages among same-sex couples and to do so in the normal course of their pastoral duties, thus defying the laws that prohibit them from doing so. He called same-sex weddings an act of biblical obedience. So where do we go from here? That 1,100 clergy that I just mentioned, that movement started in Minnesota and New York in 2011, where that many clergy signed pledges announcing their willingness to perform same-sex unions. You know, some of those ministers are serving in states where it's legal for same-sex couples to marry. And when their United Methodist parishioners come to them wanting to have a wedding, to tell them that they should say no, the Methodist Church won't allow it, it just doesn't make any sense. In the 2012 General Conference, delegates for the Western Jurisdiction, which encompasses Pacific Northwest Conference and 7 other conferences in the westernmost United States, voted to support a grassroots movement to act as if the stance against homosexuality in the discipline does not exist. You can see that there is a lot happening that is pushing the people that do not want to give toward listening more fully to God's voice. Since 2004, we have witnessed church trial after church trial for United Methodist ministers who have performed same-sex weddings, some for their own sons or daughters. In spite of that, God has not been silenced. On November 18th and 19th, just this past November, Reverend Frank Schaefer from Lebanon, Pennsylvania, was tried in a church court for presiding at the same-sex wedding ceremony for his gay son. He was found guilty and forced to release his ordination credentials, leaving him without a job, health insurance, a home, or any security. But God is still speaking. 3 Sundays ago, Tom and I stayed home from church because of the weather. It was not safe for us to get out on I-90 and drive to our church. So we turned on television and watched the service at a Reconciling United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C., Foundry United Methodist, where Frank Schaefer had been invited to give the sermon. It was a great service. He did a beautiful job, and after the sermon, they called him and his wife back up to the front, presented them with a check for $30,000 they had raised to try to tide them over until they can find what they're going to do in the future. There's more. Bishop Minerva Carcaño, Bishop of the California Pacific Annual Conference, has invited Frank to serve in ministry in California. She does not have the power to reinstate his credentials, but she said, and where is her quote? She said, Frank Schaefer chose to stand with Jesus as he extended love and care to his gay son and his partner. We should stand with him and others who show such courage and faithfulness. Yes, God is still speaking. One more example. March 10th, just a month from now, Dr. Tom Ogletree. Have you heard of him? Dr. Tom Ogletree is a retired professor and past dean of both Yale Divinity School, Seminary, and Drew Theological Seminary. Is being tried in Stamford, Connecticut for officiating at his son's same-sex wedding. He described the wedding ceremony as one of the most meaningful ritual acts of my life. It is a shame that the church is choosing to prosecute me for this act of love, which is entirely in keeping with my ordination vows, to seek peace, justice, and freedom for all people, and with Methodism's historic commitment to inclusive ministry embodied in our slogan. Do you know our slogan? Do you know the United Methodist slogan? Open doors, open hearts, open minds. Some of you may remember Reverend Nancy Hall, who is the the head of Flat Rock Children's Home in our own conference. Nancy spoke at our annual conference 2 years ago, and she started her speech with our motto, open doors, open minds, open hearts, and she turned to Bishop Hopkins, sitting right beside her, and said, Bishop, that is a lie. and we cheered. There was some boos, too. But wait, there's more. I found out day before yesterday that Dr. Ogletree's trial has been postponed indefinitely. Bishop Clifton Ives, presiding over the trial, and pastors representing Dr. Ogletree all agreed to pursue a just resolution before resorting to a trial. 36 retired bishops and many clergy are calling for an end to church trials, stating that they are not only divisive, they are exorbitantly expensive. God is still speaking. Now, I've gone long enough, and I want to open it up. I know some of you got to get upstairs to church, especially the preacher back there. And you're going to hear a good sermon. I've already heard several people have come up to me and said, boy, did he do it this morning. So, do you have questions, objections? Do you want to throw tomatoes? Yes.
Now, what's the definition of a reconciling church? What would it make us?
What is the definition of a reconciling church? You're going to hear more about that when Jared Littleton comes in 3 weeks, because he's right on top of becoming a reconciling church. Those who have become reconciling church have a statement on their bulletin. Often they have something in the front of the church to say all are welcome. It's not anything huge. It's just simply saying to gays and lesbians, you are safe in our church. Now, people come up to me and they say, Nell, we don't discriminate. We're not called a reconciling church, but gays are welcome. Well, I want you to know, when Tom and I were here, Tom retired in 1996, there were quite a few gays who came to our church and did not stay. There were some who were members of the church who left. You need to know that if you are gay, you don't go around talking to people in your church about your opinion. Usually you're hiding. But the things that are being said that you hear, or just the debate that's going on that keeps bringing up that phrase, homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. If you are gay, you don't feel wanted. You don't feel loved. You don't feel accepted. And there are some instances, and there was one that just broke my heart, where a minister kicked a parishioner, or would not let him join the Methodist Church because he was gay. And that went to trial, and our judicial conference supported the minister, which I just don't understand that. When gays know where you're welcome and where you're not. So I think it's a matter of putting out a public statement, or having it on your bulletin board, or having something on, on the front of your church that would indicate that gays are welcome, gays and lesbians. Other questions? Jane.
Not that it makes a difference, but just for general information, where do some of the other denominations stand on open gays in their church?
I'm glad you asked that. I've got it in here somewhere. There is a history of the churches that have become welcoming to gays. The United Church of Christ began ordaining people with same-sex partners in 1970s, and by 2005 had endorsed gay marriage. In 2003, the Episcopal Church elected the first bishop living openly with a same-sex partner, Bishop Gene Robinson. The Evangelical Church, Lutheran Church of America, and the Presbyterian USA Church have both struck down barriers to ordaining gays and lesbians. United Methodists are the second largest United States Protestant group. We have about 12.5 million members. But the problem with the United Methodist Church is we are a worldwide church, and our discipline is for the whole world. The other churches, the ones that I've just mentioned, the United States part of their church is autonomous. We had an effort after the Dallas, or it wasn't, Fort Worth, Texas General Conference in 2008, where we tried to pass a resolution to separate our politics from the worldwide church. Now, we went over to Africa, sent missionaries over there. You know all those stories of how we tried to evangelize Africa, and we told them they were wrong, that they could only have one wife, and, you know, we shamed them and taught them a very fundamentalist kind of religious belief, interpretation of the Bible. That's coming back to bite us because it's the African church. You know, they've got laws over there. If you are homosexual, you can be thrown into jail. You can be executed. Am I turning away from the mic? I'm getting signals from my husband. Thanks, Tom. So part of the problem is that the African church, United Methodist Church, is growing like topsy. And so when we have a general conference, we've got a large contingency of folks from other cultures who do not understand why we are even suggesting making a change in this. Does that answer what you're asking? It makes us look kind of bad. Anything else? Thank you all for listening, for putting up with me. I said to Tom driving here this morning, you did this for 40 years, every single Sunday. But thank you for putting up with me and for inviting me, and I wish you well in your journey and in your discussions with one another.